A building boom, that is what we're told will fix our housing crisis. The National Construction Pipeline report predicts more than 500,000 people will be working in the building industry in the next few years, and a total of 34,500 new homes completed during the current term of Parliament. So will the numbers translate to actual homes? Ashley Church, Property Institute of New Zealand Chief Executive, is with us now. Predictions are all well and good, but do we have the capacity to actually achieve those sorts of numbers?
That's a really good question, and if you look at that report, I describe it as the good, the bad and the ugly. So the good is, if you reflect back on the last 2 or 3 years, 2014, 2015, there's been an increase in the number of houses actually constructed, and that's empirical, that's real, they're standing, so that's fantastic, and in that regard, the report's a really good guide. The bad is the fact that, as you say, the construction that's being posited for the next few years is a projection. So you can kind of take a guide from 2014, 2015 and suggest that the 2016 figures are probably going to be somewhere near accurate, but the further out you get with those predictions,
the more uncertain. But if they do prove to be accurate, are those the kinds of numbers that would actually help solve the housing crisis?
They would certainly go some way, and I think probably one of the things that we should be saying about this is that it's fantastic that there is actually an increase posited. So the figures that were kicking around a year or two back were around 39,000 homes being required in Auckland essentially right now. And there was another report around about the same time saying that there was a requirement for 10,000 homes to be constructed every year essentially into the foreseeable future. These sorts of numbers will start to make an impact on that, but we are not there yet.
Yeah, it's still a few years away. The other concern I have is if you're putting more and more pressure on the construction industry, surely the cost is just going to go sky high, which would undermine some of the work being done to solve the housing affordability crisis.
There's an element of that. I guess you could argue the other way that there's also economies of scale. So the more you're building and the bigger you're building, there is a suggestion that can bring the price down to some degree. I think probably the bigger issue, and again it's reflected in these two reports, is the requirement for additional labour to do that. And the numbers that are being suggested simply aren't currently available within our New Zealand workforce. So there's a requirement to bring in people who aren't actually currently in the workforce and available to do that work.
Surely one of the other concerns when you have an industry under a huge amount of pressure would be quality. And we have had issues before with the likes of leaky buildings, which is a complex issue I would admit. Sure. But surely you put a lot of pressure on builders to get stuff done basically yesterday, and those who sign off the work, it's, more houses to get round. We start to see things slip through the gaps.
You would hope that we've learnt lessons from the 90s and the early 2000s, and that councils have geared up their capacity in order to, have taken account of that and have geared up their capacity in order to provide for that. But there is always that concern that there's going to be another leaky homes or another issue which is actually going to affect a whole generation of construction of dwellings over the next few years. So you're right, it's something that we need to be constantly vigilant and concerned and aware of.
Land banking, how much does that stand in the way of actually achieving the numbers that we need?
Land banking's the really big issue in amongst all of this, and so when we're projecting forward to 2021 and we're talking about very large quantities of additional dwellings being built, particularly here in Auckland, land banking's the major issue. And when we talk about land banking, we tend to think in terms of the large landowners that own large tracts of land, but there's equally mums and dads who've subdivided sections, and the economic imperative at the moment is essentially to hold on to that, because it's the cost of a subdivision anything between $80,000 and $200,000. That section on an average sized section in central Auckland could be worth anything between $700,000 and $1 million. There'd be a small reduction in the value of the original dwelling, but all of the costs of holding that property, a little bit of extra rates, and the cost of the whatever they've had to loan to actually do that subdivision.
So why would you do it now if it could be worth more tomorrow? It's a difficult problem to get around. Thank you so much for your analysis this morning. Ashley Church from the Property Institute of New Zealand.